Given the following information, so we've got stocks A, B, and C, and we have some price, dividend, volume information. The total return of this equally weighted index is closest to. So total return, meaning we will take into account dividends, and then we need to take into account ending and opening price. We don't need to know the volumes here to answer this. So I didn't write it out exactly in this, but this up here is going to be our ending value. So it's going to be all of our ending values, and then we're adding in the dividends. So 14 plus 13 plus 12, and then we're adding in those $1 dividends to include for total return. If we were doing price return, we would only have these three price variable ending prices added in that numerator. And then our denominator will just be the price of all these added up. And we don't need to adjust this at all for any of the weightings because they're equally weighted, so we can just add them up. And that gives us 1.4, subtract out the 1, which gives us 0.4 or 40%. Answer B. Amentha Tech has total assets of 2.2 million and liabilities of 1.2 million. If its shares currently trade on the market for 32 and 82,000 shares are outstanding in the open market, then Amentha's book value is closest to. Book value is going to be pretty straightforward. We're just going to take assets, subtract out liabilities. So 2.2 minus 1.2 million, that's going to get us to B, 1 million. These values down here for what the shares currently trade at and shares outstanding, we would account for this if we were looking at market value, but those are thrown in there to throw you off. We're looking at book value, so we only need to look at these two variables. Answer B. According to the efficient market hypothesis, consistent abnormal returns using technical analysis most likely works in weak form efficiency, weak and semi-strong form efficiency, or neither weak, semi-strong, or strong form. This one's going to be answer C. Weak form efficiency is assuming that all past information is priced in, and under that assumption, you would not be able to use technical analysis to perform abnormally better and consistently over time, since all that information is priced in. Under weak form, you would potentially be able to outperform using fundamental analysis because it's assuming that all public information is not necessarily priced in, but under semi-strong form, fundamental wouldn't work, and neither under strong form either. Since under strong form, then the additional level is that all public and private information is priced in. Answer C. Calculate the present value of a stock if the stock is expected to pay dividends of $1.5 and $2 at the end of the first and second year, respectively. At the end of the second year, the stock is expected to sell for $25. Assuming that the required rate of return of 12%, the stock's intrinsic value is. So we'll be using the cash flows function on the calculator. I have these plugged in, so let's walk through. So we don't have a cash outflow because we already own the stock. We're just looking to use these cash flows and the expected sale price, and we're going to be discounting those back at 12%. So our cash flow 1 is going to be this $1.50 dividend we get in year 1. And then we have a frequency of 1. Cash flow 2 is going to be our sale price of 25, and then we're adding in that $2 dividend. So we lump those both into one cash flow of 27 in year 2. And from here, we make sure we have no other cash flows in. Go to our MPV. We have 12 as our discount rate. Scroll down and you'll hit compute, and you see we get 22.86. Answer A. The type of equity wherein the company needs to pay a scheduled dividend that has been missed before paying any dividend to common equity holders is most likely. A. Convertible preference shares. Convertible preference shares are shares that can be converted into common equity, so this isn't related to dividends, and we can rule out for that reason. B. Cumulative preference shares. This is going to be our answer. And you can think of it from the standpoint of if we miss a dividend, that accumulates and that needs to be paid. That accumulation under cumulative preference shares needs to be paid before these common equity holders receive any dividends. And then C, participating. This you can remember from the standpoint of you're going to be participating in profits. So if the company hits some profit threshold, the preference shares are going to receive a higher or special dividend above their normal scheduled dividend. Answer B. Assume that a total and price return index for the same group of stocks start with the same value. While comparing the two indices, the year-end total return index will most likely be 1 greater than the price index if the price index falls, and lower than the price index if the price index rises. That's going to be incorrect. Under any scenario, a total return is probably going to be higher than a price return if any dividends whatsoever are paid, regardless of whether it falls or rises. 2, the same as the price index if the constituent stocks do not pay dividends. That will be correct. If there's no dividends included, then there's no difference between total and price return. It just ends up being ending price over beginning price. And then 3, greater than price index if the constituent stocks pay dividends. That's also going to be correct. And the reason for this is because when a dividend gets paid out, that the amount of dividend paid out decreases the price of the stock. And so the dividend being included in total return is going to increase the value that you have at the end that you're comparing to the beginning value. And the price return is getting hurt by that dividend, essentially. So we've got 2 and 3 are accurate. So 1 we can rule out, and C we can also rule out since those both have 1. And go with answer B. You've been provided with the following information regarding a market cap index for the years 2017 and 18. We've got a lot of information here on the different securities in this index. Given that the index value was 889 on January 1st, 2017, what is the index value on January 1st, 2018? So we're going to be calculating the return of this market cap weighted index, and then we apply that to the index value, and then that's going to give us our number here. So for a market cap weighted index, the key things we need to know ending market cap value, and then we're going to need to know beginning market cap value. All this other stuff in here is really just noise. We don't need to use any of it. We just need to know these two values, and then we know the overall return of the portfolio. Because they're weighted by market cap, we just add these up. So let's do that. Our starting market cap, adding these 5 values, is going to be 156. Ending market cap, adding these 5 values, is 144. Sorry, this is not going to be an increase. It's actually going to be a decrease. So we're going to take beginning market or ending market cap divided by beginning market cap gets us 0.9231. And then we're going to apply that to our 889 value, which gets us to 820.6359. Answer A. During the year 2010, an index portfolio benchmarked to a newly formed equity index generated a total capital gain of 125, while cumulative dividend generated by index securities amounted to 50. The total price of the constituent securities at the end of the period was 1250. The total return of the index portfolio is closest to. Let's bring in our formula here. Our return is going to be equal to our gains plus our dividends, and then we're dividing by beginning value. We're given all 3 of these, so gain of 125 and securities or dividends of $50. And this gain really is similar to if we were given the ending value and the beginning value. We would just subtract that out, but we're just given the gain in this scenario. So we've got 125 plus 50, and then we're dividing that by our beginning value, which is going to be this 1250, and we subtract out our gain of 125. So that gets us a return of 1.1556, which would correspond with answer C, 15.56 return. The exhibit below illustrates the limit orders outstanding on a market's book following a large order's arrival. Kim Toyama submits a day order to buy 18 contracts, limit 50.3. Toyama's average trade price is closest to. So we want to buy 18 contracts. If we're buying, we're going to be looking at the offer side. So we're going to be over here. And our limit is going to be 50.3. So we're not going to pay higher than that limit. So anything below 50.3, which would be this 50.4, we can take right off of here. The key here now is that makes this tricky is we want to buy 18 contracts. There's only 15 available. So only 15 of our 18 contracts are going to get executed. And so we need to calculate our average trade price based on those 15 contracts. So at this point, it's just a weighted average calculation formula. So we're going to take 7 of these 15 contracts were executed at 50.2. So 7 divided by 15 multiplied by 50.2. And then we'll do 8 divided by 15 multiplied by 50.3, which is these values right here. Gives us a average trade price of 50.25, basically splitting it halfway. Answer B. The table below summarizes information concerning a market cap weighted index. So we've got stocks A, B, and C, and we have some price per share at the beginning, dividend, end of period price per share, and shares outstanding. The price return on the market cap weighted index is closest to. So price return, we're going to be ignoring dividends for price return. The columns we will be concerned with are beginning price, ending price, and then we're going to use shares outstanding to market cap weight this. So our return, normal formula, ending value divided by beginning value minus 1. To get our beginning values, we're going to just multiply this price per share by shares outstanding. We can see that 120 times 45570. Then we're going to add that down the line. So 200 times this column, 180 times this column. And we don't need to do anything with the weighting because we are market cap weighting. So by multiplying these two columns together, that's going to give us our market cap weighting. And then we just need to do the same for ending period. So we're going to do 140 times this column, add that to 250 times this column, and 160 to this column. So that gives us our ending value here, big number, beginning value here, big number. Take that ending divided by beginning, subtract out 1, gets us a return of 0.0435, which would be the same as 4.35%. Answer B.